Before you can start a real board of directors for a company or an organization, you should probably consider creating a board of directors for your everyday life.
Welcome to this episode of the Business of Athletes podcast, where we cover the business of athletes from all angles. And today on the pod, we got a real legendary episode. I'm interviewing one of my big bros. I'm interviewing one of the flyest men on the planet. One of the greatest thinkers I know. One of the best executors, man. I'm interviewing Amal Yamusah, man. He's the founder and CEO of Make a Play Foundation. Amal, welcome, bro.
Little bro, what up, man? It's a pleasure, and thank you for having me. That too kind with your intro, but I'll take it.
Hey, man, nah, that's you. That's you, man. That's who you are, dog. So I want to spend this time right now and let you tell a little bit about yourself for the audience, about your background, where you went to school, what you've done up until this point, and then we're gonna get into the meat and potatoes, this whole thing.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for having me. As you know, my name is Amal Yamusah, the proud founder of the Make a Play Foundation. Athletically, I played my college ball at Morehouse in Atlanta. Gave me an incredible opportunity to get an A-class education, while also living out a dream of mine, which was to play college football. After Morehouse, I was fortunate enough to get my master's degree from Columbia School of Journalism. There, I was in the city for 18 months and had a really great experience. But for me, the ultimate goal was to get to law school, and that's where you and I met. And so I went to Vanderbilt Law School, was motivated to go by a gentleman named David Williams, who I'm sure I'll reference a little bit later in the conversation. But at the time, he was the first black athletic director in the history of the SEC conference. And he also split his time as the director of sports the professor of sports law at the law school. And so I was fortunate enough to really be mentored by a living legend. And that led me to the athletic department, where I was able to intern in compliance during my first year. And then my last 2 years, I was fortunate enough to tutor in the athletic department. And that's where you and I met and built this relationship that's lasted 5+ years. So excited to talk a little bit more about my different experiences and what's led me here today. But that's just a little bit about me and my background.
Word, man, I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that. So let's talk about your time at Morehouse for a second. So we got a lot of common, college football, but also the frat. So yes, sir, man. But I just kind of want to ask you: are there any experiences as a college athlete that you leaned on after your time playing ball, like in creating your business and going to Columbia and going to law school? Like, are there any experiences that you still lean on today?
Of course. I think being a college athlete has literally shaped me into the person that I am today, and has shaped all of my professional, personal experiences. I know for me, it was a culture shock coming from northern New Jersey to, at that time we had two-a-days. I'll never forget the day that I got down there, August 4th, 2000, and I believe it was 2010. And we had practice in the middle of we're talking about the middle of Atlanta heat. It was crazy. It was completely a culture shock, but I think it really provided me with the tools to be successful on and off campus. So I think from the first standpoint, time management, I know everybody says it, but it really is true. I think as a student athlete, you have to be really resourceful, especially if you like me and you were really focused on also building our brand as scholars on campus and really digging into our studies. And so it becomes a really big chore. How do I balance all of my scholastic affairs with my athletic responsibilities? And so I think I first learned the value of time management and being resourceful with your time. Two, I think I learned teamwork in a non-traditional sense. I think for me, I can look back on it now and probably admit that I wasn't the best teammate. And even though I still have a lot of really great relationships with a lot of the people that I shared the football field with, I certainly think it taught me the importance of being accountable to not only yourself, but to those that you share that field with. I think looking back on that time, I look at it fondly, even though I didn't at the time. I wasn't the captain type, self-admittedly, when I was in school playing football. But I think I learned over time that you taught me this line. I'll never forget it. You said the way you do anything is the way you do everything.
I can't take no credit for that, man.
That's
That's
Coach
Coach
Mason.
Mason, man.
That's
That's
Coach
Coach
Mason.
Mason.
And that to me is how I look back on my time. And while I certainly wish I could have done some things differently on the football field, I think today I try to apply that to my everyday life. And I think a lot of those skills, a lot of those tools were sharpened on that football field. And there's really no way to talk about make a play without talking about my athletic experience because, quite honestly, I didn't even know what professional development was in college. Typically, when typically when companies or organizations came to campus, we had practice or games, and so I can honestly say, even if they had come on an off day, I probably wouldn't have wanted to go on my one Monday off. And so I think looking back on it, it opened up my eyes to not only the some of the obstacles that we have to overcome as student athletes at a small Division II school. But when I was fortunate enough to go to Columbia and Vanderbilt, I saw that a lot of these same issues existed, regardless of conference, regardless of division. So, yeah, super grateful for my time at Morehouse, and my head coach, Coach Freeman, is actually still there to this day. So, huge shout out to him for giving me the opportunity to play college football.
Word. So, I feel like there's a lot of wisdom in that what you just said, and I kind of want to double back before we move on to your time out of school and talk about AD David Williams, man, and like just you understand it and I understand it because we got a chance to feel it, but like just the gravity of a legend like that, of a man like that who can pull people into his circle, into his realm, and then just influence just by a couple words, just by an hour at a time, man. Like we had the opportunity to be around somebody like that. Like what would you tell a college athlete who's at an institution like Vanderbilt with an AD who cares about his students, his student athletes? Like how would you tell them to utilize that relationship and to just like, take advantage of all of that?
Yeah, for sure. I think number one would be schedule time to speak to that individual. We're super fortunate that everybody in the athletic department, you usually have, their information is typically public. So whether they have an email address or whether you can literally just drop by the office and ask the secretary to schedule some time, you, I tell our athletes this all the time. You want to strike when the pot is hot, and that means that you're never more marketable than when you're actually playing. And
Right.
so with that, you're going to realize that a lot of people in that athletic department, one, are going to make time for you even if they don't have it. So I think one is scheduling time. Two, I think is finding some type of doing some research, finding some commonalities and some mutual points that you can refer to during the conversation. I know for me, I did so much research on Professor Williams before I even had a conversation with him, and that allowed the conversation to kind of to flow effortlessly. And so I would tell the athletes, one, schedule at a time, and I think everybody has 15 to 30 minutes to spare, whether you're in your first semester as a freshman or your last semester as a senior. And two is bring something to that conversation. Whether it's researching the person that you're looking to speak to, whether it's a specific ask, whether I know for me, the ask came a little bit later. The ask came after I had already spent some time nurturing the relationship, but ultimately, Professor Williams allowed me to intern in his athletic department and later to make some money in college as a tutor. And so, yeah, prioritize those relationships because as you see, my Vanderbilt network isn't just limited to the people that I went to law school with. I was able to build relationships with people like you and folks like Isaiah, Donovan, Colin, all folks that actually ended up joining the Make a Play Foundation in some capacity afterwards.
Word. And before we move on, man, just honor and respect to David Williams, man. AD David Williams, the late great. Rest in peace to him.
Rest in
Much love
peace.
to his wife Gail and his whole family, man. That was just a monster of a man. Like just his gravity, just the things he did for people. So honor and respect to him,
And
man.
Gary, and if
So
I could, it was so important for me to see the way that he maneuvered that campus. I mean, I had researched, we could be honest about this at the time. He was the highest paid athletic director in the country, and you would never know it. Professor Williams was in a sweatsuit on his golf cart. You would never know, the most unassuming man, but had a presence and always found time to speak to anybody that sought his advice or sought his guidance. And so I think I've taken a lot of what he taught me and applied it to my own organization. And I think just taking class with him in sports law, the way he was able to break down the nuances of tax law and sports law and antitrust. He did it in such a relatable way that I really understood. If you really, to understand a really important concept, you really know you understand it if you're able to break it down into simple terms. And I think that's something that A.D. Williams mastered, and something that I've tried to do as well in my career.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So this is a little nuanced question I can ask you because we've had this conversation. So
Yeah.
so I know about your time at Priority Sports and Entertainment and just kind of the role it played in inspiring you to start something, start Make a Play. Not something like Make a Play, it's to start Make a Play. Um, so can you like expound on your time at Priority Sports and just kind of what you saw in that organization to inspire you to create the type of community you've created with Make a Play?
Of course. First, it was crazy how I even got introduced to priority sports. I knew I was going to take a non-traditional path when I got to law school. The goal for me was to end up at some type of competitive sports agency. At the time, I had a professor, and the class was information or methods of information gathering. A very interesting professor, but who ended up telling me one day, listen, I know you want to enter sports law. I have a connection from back in the day. We went to sleepaway camp together when we were in grade school. A gentleman by the name of Rick Smith, who I would love to connect you with. At the time, I thought it was lip service, but he actually ended up making the connection, and I ended up building just an incredibly unique bond with Rick Smith, who served as the director of front office, coaches, and broadcasters department at Priority Sports. And he was also a partner at the firm. And he really opened up the doors of the agency to me and allowed me to intern during the second semester of during the summer of my second semester in law school. And my time at Priority was it was invaluable, is what I would say. I think one, I realized what it looked like to actually walk the walk and really be an organization, or for them an agency that prioritizes the athlete first. And so I know for them, not only did they, were they wizards in terms of contract negotiation, contract execution, but a lot of the athletes were at the agency on a day-to-day basis, just hanging out. Anyone from client services to marketing to with Mark Bartlestein himself. And so I think, one, I realized how important it was to prioritize the needs, the wants of the athletes. Two, I think from an operational standpoint, it was incredibly invaluable. Literally, Priority Sports was at the time, I think they were the 12th largest, or generated the 12th, I can't remember the exact statistic, but they were the 12th largest sports agency in North America at the time. And at that time, we're talking about representing the likes of Gordon Hayward, Bradley Beal, Kyle Kuzma, and the list goes on. So they represented star athletes across NBA, NFL, and they also represented the likes of Dan Quinn, Steve Kerr on the front office side. But even with all of the money they were generating, they only had 26 employees. And so what I realized was, wow, this is an incredible organization that has really built a family atmosphere. And if you're an athlete that's looking for the likes of a CAA or an Excel or one of these behemoths, Priority might not be for you, but those that really prioritize family and community, which is what Priority did such a good job of promoting, I think they're the number one agency in the game. And so I think, one, I learned how important it was to prioritize the athlete themselves, and I think, two, I was able to realize the importance of just managing a business and controlling overhead. And so I had a lot of respect for Mark Bartlestein and what he had created at Priority, a lot of respect for Rick Smith and the front office, broadcasters, and coaches department that he had built out. And I look back on my time and have nothing bad to say about Priority. They were incredibly instrumental in helping me get to where I'm at. And when I talk a little bit about how I developed Make a Play, I'll refer back to that experience as well.
Okay, bet, man, and that's a perfect segue into the next question I was going to ask you. So, I think it's necessary here to define what Make a Play is for our listeners who might not know. So, Make a Play Foundation is a not-for-profit 501(c) organization that prepares underrepresented athletes for executive careers in competitive industries. So, as you're creating that, man, I was there for like all of the ideation, and not all of
Yeah,
it, but you know,
sure.
I was blessed to have those conversations with you and hear like how you were thinking with your time at Priority Sports, and just the technicals of it. So I want to start here before I go into like Make a Play as a whole, like just as a company. Like, what are the most important things to you in taking an idea from infancy to like execution and really building it? Because you've really built a robust community or a robust brand about around Make a Play.
Absolutely. I think one of the skills people don't talk enough about is organization. And I think I was able to be, I think what some of my early board members appreciated was the fact that we had a lot of structure and organization at the very onset. I think when you're asking for people to lend their time, their energy, their resources, it's incredibly important that at the top you have to be organized and structured. And so I think that was what helped us at the beginning. I also think I had just an incredible community of peers and mentors that were invested in my success. And so, I didn't know anything about the nonprofit space, but I happened to have a twin sister who had worked in or worked at Harlem United, which is a prominent nonprofit organization in Harlem, New York, for over 6 years at the time, who told me, I think this is a great idea, but I think you can actually scale this, right? Because Make a Play, the original model was I was going to go back to all my alma maters and do some type of professional development workshop once a year. She told me, I think it's a great idea, but I don't think it belongs in, I think you're thinking too small about this. And she was the one that gave me the idea to scale this into a nonprofit. When I think about how did I actually turn the idea into, or how did I manifest the idea? Literally, I talked to everybody I could talk to about it. And I'm not talking about mentors and professors and people that I trusted from a senior management position. I was also talking to peers, mentees of mine. I talked to you often about this idea that I had. I
Yep.
literally saw Isaiah this past weekend, and you almost got emotional talking about all of the R&D phase of MAP when this was literally a sketch. And for me at the time, I knew the name Make a Play would somehow be a part of this organization, but I didn't really know what that looked like. But I leaned on my experience in the athletic department at Vanderbilt and also leaned on my experience at Priority Sports in their front office department to kind of mold and shape this idea into a scalable business with a really clear mission statement. And so from the athletic department side, I knew that regardless of if you went to a small HBCU liberal arts school in Atlanta or you went to one of a U.S. News top 20 university at Vanderbilt, if you were a minority student athlete, you probably didn't have a professional development program or platform that was tailored to your individual needs. From the front office side at Priority, honestly, before I went to Priority, I didn't even know that front office executives and when we talk about front office executives, we mean directors of operations, general managers, commissioners, et cetera. I didn't even know that they had representation. And so that opened my eyes to the world of senior leadership. And so I began researching super early on and found that it's almost impossible to talk about senior leadership in this country without talking about athletics. And that's because 94% of our executives in this country played a competitive sport in high school or above. And for women CEOs or executives, 66% of them played at the university level or higher. And so we are on a path to reconcile that with the fact that less than 5% of those executives identify as underrepresented minorities. And so really Make a Play represented my, you know, really provided me with this unique opportunity to solve for both problems. How do we create a professional development platform that is tailored to the needs of underrepresented athletes, and how do we do it in a way that encourages those athletes to pursue front office and Fortune 500, or excuse me, front office positions at Fortune 500 companies? So, yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does, and I'm gonna go back to that in a second. But we talked about the what. Let's talk about the how. So you've got a professional development platform. How are you getting? How are you leveraging these relationships and your training program to get these students these jobs, these internships? Like, what is it about your program that makes these companies trust you and trust your program?
It's a great question. And I remember at the beginning, and for context, I formally incorporated Make a Play in October of 2019. and formally launched in March of 2020. At the time, had absolutely no connections to Fortune 500 companies, had absolutely no access to senior leaders at those companies. But what I did have was a collection of peers that I had that worked at these companies, whether it was at the entry level or the intermediate level. And I was able to leverage those connections. One, I think I had the benefit of, you know, time on my side. We launched during a very turbulent time in the United States. One, we were in the heart of the pandemic. Two, we were dealing with George Floyd's murder. And so one, I think from the pandemic side, I think companies have the time to listen. To this day, I haven't pitched to a single company that we've partnered with in person. We've been able to really leverage technology on our side. From George Floyd's standpoint, I think companies were really listening to Black and brown employees and figuring out what can we do to better support them. And so, I think we launched at the right time. What I think enabled partner companies to trust us super early on was the value proposition and the data. And so I tell all of our athletes, if you have an idea, you have to make sure that it's supported by data, metrics, and insights. And what the majority of our partners understood was that athletes have a propensity to work hard. Some of our athletes in the past have been our top earners, our best workers. And so when we coupled that with the diversity lens, I think partners understood this was a unique opportunity to solve for both problems. How do we attract, engage, and retain athletes that have historically performed incredibly well in the workplace? And how do we also attract diverse candidates? And so, I think looking back on it, to this day, we have over 40 corporate partners, and 90% of those corporate partnerships have been facilitated by peers, friends, colleagues that have connected me with somebody a bit more senior. So our strategy is pretty simple. If we wanted a partnership with Bank of America, I reached out to a friend that worked at Bank of America, sent them our marketing materials. That person then sent it up the food chain. And if there was synergy, we met and we believe Make a Play at that particular time, even at an early stage, sold itself. And so, again, it's a platitude at this point, but your net work is really your net worth. And I think I was able to leverage those incredible people from my inner circle that were able to connect me with the companies that they worked at. And I think from there we were able to, again, lean on the training. This isn't charity work that we do. Our students work incredibly hard on and off the field to prepare for these roles. And I think once they had the confidence and saw that our students were performing incredibly well, not only in the interview and application stage, but also when they actually had time to intern, I think this has enabled us to scale pretty quickly.
Absolutely, man. And just taking a look at your website and your materials, like your board of directors is super, super robust. You've got NFL athletes. Like you said, you've got C-suite executives. You got lawyers. Like, you really have it all. So you mentioned that your organization was a big piece in leveraging that network and getting them to give you that time and believe in your product. So can you add to that for anybody who might be watching this, for any young athlete who might have an idea like this and wants to build a board of directors based on their network? What are some must-haves? Like, what should they do to build that community that is willing to give them their time to their product?
It's a great question. And I lean on advice I got from my good friend from Morehouse, Jonathan Hill, who told me before you can start a real board of directors for a company or an organization, you should probably consider creating a board of directors for your everyday life. And think of a board of directors as your coaching staff, right? You need somebody who helps you from a strength and conditioning standpoint. You need somebody who helps you from an offensive standpoint. You need somebody who helps you from a defensive standpoint. So for us, that was risk and legal. And so I think, one, think about the people in your life that can become a part of that coaching staff or a part of that board of directors. From there, I think it's easy to begin to isolate the ones or the people in your network that have the time and the bandwidth to commit to a large endeavor. Let's say you do create a board of directors for your organization. And so for me, it wasn't a super difficult task for me to build my board of directors because these people had served in similar capacities, just informally for a long time. So I'm thinking about my twin sister who served as chairman of the board. I'm thinking about one of my closest friends, Chibu Ananobi, who I happen to share the football field with. He was a fellow D tackle who, ended up having a successful 4-year career in the NFL. I think about someone I consider a sister, Isis Freeman, who was actually the one that connected me with Professor Williams at Vanderbilt. She'd gone to Vanderbilt for undergrad. She had gone to Harvard Law for law school at the time, worked at the Clippers, and now Netflix. These were all people that were a part of my personal circle and also happened to have a unique set of skills that we were able to leverage on the board. And so I think about just the change in the NFL over the past 10 years. And I actually was listening to Jamarcus Russell on the Pivot the other day. And he said the big difference between the NFL and quarterbacks 10 years ago was that coaches were focused on their system. Nowadays, it's about how do we tailor our system to the needs of our athletes, of our quarterbacks. And I think, I looked at the strengths of the people on my board of directors and figured out, okay, how do we carve out positions so that we're getting the best out of each and every one of you? So, for instance, I may have had lawyers that went to Harvard and worked at top law firms who got most excited when they were working on our newsletter, we're working on our media strategy, we're working on our marketing efforts. And so I think I was attentive to not only their needs, what did they want to contribute as board members, but I think I was also able to successfully identify their strengths and their value proposition, and then work backwards to develop or to create positions that really accentuated that.
That's what's up, man. That's what's up. I think that piece about your everyday board of directors is huge.
For sure.
Man. That's game. That's real game, man. So let's shift gears for a second, man, because we are in a new landscape in college sports right now, new NIL landscape, and it's all about building a brand and things like this. And I think that's something that you've done extremely well with Make a Play, but not only building a brand, you've built a community, not only through your board of directors, but like through the athletes who are in Make a Play, who are in your cohorts. You guys are having meetups, dinners, and these people are a real community. So what advice do you have for young student athletes who are not only trying to build a brand and monetize based on NIL, but who are trying to build a community?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I was actually just having this conversation on Sunday with some fraternity brothers. And I think what we were all able to do well was we were able to identify things that we naturally did on campus and somehow turn that into a career. So I'm thinking about who was I to my chapter at the time. Outside of just being like the big football player that was loud and obnoxious at the time, I was also somebody that really enjoyed creating programs for the chapter. Someone who enjoyed the process of creating names, like line names for my neos. Someone who really invested in like the creative elements of building a probate. I think going to law school, it's pretty much like where creatives go to die, right? I certainly had to reclaim those parts of myself, those parts of that creativity when I was starting Make a Play. But I think I did a good job of identifying, okay, these are things I would have done whether I was getting paid for it or not. We would literally have 3-hour conversations at the athletic department that would take like literally. I remember to this day, you would come and we would just chop it up, and I think
we was just
chopping it up. And this is how I was able to convince our 20 board members to join, is just having those individual conversations with folks, and really not only selling them on what we were trying to do here at Make a Play, but also actively listening. And so for those that are looking to, in some form or fashion, brand themselves on campus, I think you have to really do some, take an honest inventory. What are the things that you like doing? Are you the person in your network that, a person on a football team that connects your non-football friends with your football friends? Are you the person that likes to connect folks? Are you the person that likes to crank out work on your own? I think once you identify that, it's easier to carve out that brand. And then once you have that brand, I think everybody on that campus should know you for that. So I think I've done a decent job at this point of carving out a brand in my personal network. I think folks know if they have an athlete in their family, if they have an athlete that's a friend, I'm typically they think of Make a Play when they're thinking about how do we provide them with opportunities. And so again, I think it all stems back to taking the time to reflect and think about the skills that you've developed on that campus, the friends that you've uh, the friendships, excuse me, that you built on that campus. And then I think once you've identified those things, it's easier to build that brand and promote that brand. If you have questions about you know branding as it relates to NIL, I know Kirby is someone who we've discussed before, is someone who's incredible in that space. But I think that would be my advice.
Word. I appreciate that, man. And yeah, we're gonna talk to Kirby soon, man. So
No,
I'm excited about
no.
that. But I got one more question for you, and we can wrap. Man, you have an incredible list of partners. You have Microsoft, J.P. Morgan, Credit Suisse, uh, UBS. When dealing with those type of partners, they expect a certain level of quality. What advice do you have for young athletes on providing that level of quality from a product, whatever it may be, and then developing consistency with that
For
product?
sure. There are so many parallels between the professional development space and ball. I literally every year, and I do think this is where my legal background did help me because one, right, these are formal partnerships that you're entering into. And so for us, we had to create a donation implementation agreement that partners have to agree to terms, and we're held to a particular standard that's legally binding, right? So let's say a company donates a certain amount of money. Um, we have to make sure that we're providing strong return on investment. So that could mean number of candidates that they're looking to build relationships with, number of candidates they're looking to potentially interview and hire. It can be number of events they're looking to host with our students. I think we were hyper focused in year one on providing that return on investment. And so think of it the way just think of it as an undrafted free agent, and you sign a 1 year contract. You have to go out there and ball if you want to get a second contract.
Yeah,
And that's our
that's
priority
a fact.
every single year: is how do we provide our students with the best training so that they're not only excelling in the interview and application period, but they're also excelling once they hit that desk or once they hit that office. And so for us, we were again hyper focused on providing that return on investment. And I think once partners started to realize not only were we outperforming our first year contract, we were also building. And so we went from 48 athletes in year one to 200 in year two to 420 in year three. So I think they,
Amazing,
right? And
bro.
I think as an athlete, that's the equivalent of not only having the stats to support it, but you out here, you done stayed healthy, you done put in that work in the weight room, you have built relationships with teammates and people potentially in that front office that are going to be willing to advocate for you. And so, I think for us it was prioritizing performance because a lot of folks in this space, a lot of organizations in this space, aren't necessarily concerned with providing that return on investment, at least not in the ways that we measure success. And so, again, focus on performance versus money or scale. And I think once you focus on performance, that becomes your brand. So companies know at this particular time uh, they're going to get a list of incredibly high qualified candidates that really represent the best minority athletes in the country, whether that's on the high school level, whether that's on the college level, or whether that's on the early career level. And I think that's what gave them the confidence to turn that first year contract into a multi-year contract, to turn that, let's say, $1,000 donation into a far larger donation. And so I think once you prioritize performance, and this is for any athlete, this is for any businessman, it's easier to it makes everything easier. And so prioritize the performance and then also make sure that the business is right. So for those that don't have a legal background and are looking to build a business. Make sure that if you don't have a lawyer attached to the network, figuring out someone who can help from just a risk standpoint, someone who can help you write those documents that again aren't, lawyers go to school for a very long time to be able to draft these types of documents and contracts. And so that's the advice that I would give. But again, sports, and that's why I think we've also been able to carve out a niche. We use sports as the vehicle to communicate all of our lesson plans. And so we even refer to our theory of change as a fall forward plan, this idea that so many of us Black and brown athletes have been taught to invest in a fallback plan. But all of my greatest mentors told me falling backwards or creating a fallback plan almost conceives defeat. And similar to what we said earlier about doing anything the way you do everything, we teach our students to fall forward. And so being able to prepare for your professional life and your athletic life at the same time and not having to sacrifice one or the other, I think it's also allowed us to build rapport with our partner companies. And we at this particular time, I wouldn't call us experts, but we certainly have a pulse on the college athletic landscape, and very difficult stuff, right? All Division I athletes now have a COVID year. Most of our partner companies don't even understand what that means, right? They don't even understand what having a redshirt year means. They don't really understand a lot of these things. And I think being able to answer some of those questions that they had, not only for Make a Play students, but other non-minority athletes in their network, allowed us to separate ourselves and allowed us to grow one partnership into 5 partnerships, into 20, into 40.
Man, focusing and prioritizing performance. That's a gem right there, man. This whole interview is full of gems, man, and I really appreciate you giving some of your time to me and to like the audience who's gonna watch this, because they're gonna benefit. Just the level of intelligence and organization and just game that you brought right here, man. And for any young athlete who watches this, if you're looking to fall forward and you're looking to really do your thing outside of ball, even with ball, man, tap in with Make a Play. And Amal, tell them where they can find you before we get off, all your socials and everything like that.
Of course. You can follow Make a Play at We Make a Play. That's our at across our social media platforms. You can also type in Make a Play Foundation on LinkedIn. Super proud of you, little bro, man. This is a full circle moment. We talked about this on the phone, but if we got paid for every conversation like this that we've had offline, we'd both be a lot richer than we are. And I think to bring this knowledge to your audience is, I'm super proud of you and honored that you thought of me to share my story and my background. But thinking about the way that you branded yourself on that campus as a student and an athlete, the way that you grinded to make the league, all the incredible things you've been able to do off the outside of football, with your family, with your professional pursuits. It's been an honor to watch you grow and develop, man. So keep doing what you're doing, and I'm gonna be tuning into this episode and many more.
I appreciate it, man. I think it's important that we give our people their flowers while they can smell them, bro. And you are definitely one of those ones who deserves to get some flowers, man. This thing that you built and just how you carry yourself and the way you pour into people is it's a pleasure to watch, and I'm glad to be one of those people that you poured into, man. So we're gonna wrap it up right here, man. That's it for this episode of Business of Athletes podcast. We'll see you next time.
All right, everybody.